It's not New Comic Book Day, it's New Comic Book Month. Stay tuned to see what I mean. Welcome back, comic book fans. It's Rusty again with Collector Auctions, and in today's episode, we're going to do something a little bit different. This is an episode that my wife has been asking me to do. She basically said, why haven't you done a video like this? You've got lots of comics, you talk about it every week. Why don't you do a video about your new comic pickups? And that might be a little surprising to you guys, why I haven't done that exactly. You see me pick up comics from comic book shops, from eBay, from the mail, from whatnot, from comic book shows, all the time. And you even see me pick up some brand new comic books too along those hauls when I go to the comic book shops. And so you definitely seen some books that I've picked up on New Comic Book Day. I've gone to a lot of New Comic Book Days, Wednesdays at my local comic book shop throughout the last couple years of this channel. And the one thing I never really talked about is that's not my primary way of getting new comic books. Like a lot of you, you didn't grow up or you don't live near an LCS. It's not something you can go to every day. Now, luckily, since I've moved to Maryland over about 30 years ago now, I've had local comic book shops in this area, all over this Baltimore area. And watching this channel, you know I go to a lot of these, and I've spotlighted a lot of these shops. And there's a couple in particular that I have spent a lot of New Comic Book Days there on those Wednesdays. Cards, Comics, and Collectibles up in Reisterstown, and also down in Annapolis, Third Eye Comics. And I chose both of those because those are my favorite shops. They're local. I've gone to both of them for years. And especially Third Eye, they buy so many comics that you can get a lot of variants and things like that. Well, that's not my experience growing up. My experience growing up, I lived in southern West Virginia, kind of out in the country. We didn't have any local comic book shops. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take what was my last order I got in, and I'll explain. When I say that, you'll understand as we go along, and I'll explain how someone like me, somebody like you, a lot of you who don't have those comic book shops near you, how do you get new comics? Well, this is the way I've been doing it. Even though I live in this area now and I could go every Wednesday I wanted to, this is the way I still get most of my new comics every month. So stay tuned and we'll go through what I picked up last month, and I'll explain everything to you. But before we begin, definitely hit that like, smash the subscribe, and click on that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the episodes that I put out each and every week, Mondays and Fridays at 10 a.m. All right, guys, stay tuned and we'll get to the books. All right, everybody, so as I was explaining, not living near an LCS growing up, how do you get new comic books? Now, there were some local places nearby that I could get comics, but it was very few and far between where I could find them. Growing up, when I was really young, it was at the local at the local drugstore. And then at the local hospital in their gift shop, they actually had comics. But that wasn't very reliable every week. And to be honest, I wasn't really aware of any kind of schedule. I didn't know when comics came out on any kind of schedule. I wasn't privy to that information. We didn't have the internet. And I wasn't aware of any fanzines, really. I was just buying comics off the stand, and what information I could get was coming from inside those comic books. Like, when I started ordering back issues, my first back issues I ever bought were from companies that advertised in comic books in the early 80s. And I think my first company I ever bought anything from was from J&S Comics up in the New England area, I believe. They may still be around. I'm not really sure. But other places, you find ads in there. You could definitely, I know I probably ordered some Mile High comics back in the day. I remember some of those early 80s books. You'd have the double page spread in the comics, specifically Marvel. I remember that double page spread with all the comics that they were selling. It wasn't all of the comics, but a vast majority of comics that they were selling. Anyway, that's how I started with back issues, but then there came the point, what about new issues? And as we got into 1985. I'm not really sure exactly when I started, but I did start finding a service that I could get my comics from. And I don't remember my original company, I'm sure I ordered from, but at some point I started using Lieutenant as a provider of comics. And what was nice about that was you order in advance. Once I kind of got into the system, you'd order in advance, 3 months usually in advance. You'd order your comics, and it would be for the month. So that's what I mean by it's not New Comics Books Day, it's New Comic Books Month. It's the month. And I would get my books from Lieutenant every month, and I'd have to order 3 months in advance, and I'd order a whole month's worth of books. So what I ended up doing, and I kept with Lieutenant for probably about 6 years before I finally switched over in the early 90s to my current provider. I mean, we're talking in early 91, 92, somewhere in there. I switched over to M&M Comics out of San Antonio, Texas. And I've been a customer with them ever since. And I mean, that's been a pretty long time at this point. What's funny is I've been using the service for so long that my account number is like 4-digit number. And I remember having conversations with them in the past when an issue arose and I had to contact them and everything. And they looked at the account number and they like, I can't believe that you've been with us that long. I'm definitely not an original. I'm sure there's definitely people who've ordered with them much longer than I have, but they can tell I'm still one of that original group or an old group at this point. And what's nice about these services is you're usually getting 30 to 35% off of most of your books, with specials on certain other ones up to 50% usually. And it'll vary a little bit here and there, but it's a significant discount. And back in the day, it didn't seem like that much, but you were definitely saving money. But in today's economy, with books being $4.99, $5.99, $6.99, and I still get that discount on these books, man, that is saving a lot of money. And it's still expensive, but imagine buying these things just straight off the stand or at the comic book shop for cover price, and it is a ton of money. I mean, it used to be you go in there and you could get a stack of books for $20. I mean, a real stack of books. Now you're walking away with 4 books. It's crazy how expensive these things get. So a service like this is really essential to saving a lot of money. But the problem is you are ordering things 3 months in advance, and there's times when you miss things. So that has been lucky for me now that I've got these comic book shops nearby. I can supplement what I miss by going to the comic book shops on New Comic Book Day. But for me, for the vast majority of years, it's been New Comic Books Month. And one thing you do miss out on is the timely release of certain things. You might reading fanzines and hearing things on the news, especially now that you have the internet. If I'm waiting for those books to come in once a month, then sometimes you do miss out on that book coming in, or the books that blows up and everybody's excited about it, and then 3 weeks later you get to be excited about it. I mean, that's kind of the way I grew up with the comics. Now, and like as I said, in today's terms, with the internet and the how close local comic book shops are to me, I don't have to worry about that. But I'm still sure there's a vast majority of fans out there that don't have that luxury of going to a comic book shop every Wednesday if they definitely know that they missed something. But let's just go through, as I said, really, I guess it's been almost 30, is that right? Let's see, 35 years I've been ordering. Maybe it's a little bit longer. 35 plus years I've been ordering from a service every month. And as I said, M&M Comics is my provider, and I stick with them. The reason I switched over from Lieutenant was in the early 90s was it was a discount issue. They had decreased their discount on the books, and there was M&M. I was looking to get that extra discount back, I guess. So as I said, I've stuck with M&M for a lot of years at this point. I would highly recommend them. The books, I will tell you this, in the almost getting close to 25 years of service from them. I've only had one major issue with a shipment, and we ended up resolving it. They ended up, you could tell they had packed the books in the bags, and the bags had been dropped. Both of them had been dropped, and every book in there in both bags had significant corner damage, and I had to contact them. I literally took photos of every book and sent it back to them, and I said, what can we do? And I had hoped that it was so quick that they could replace those, but they didn't have them in stock, and that was a month that I had to scramble a little bit. They reimbursed me for everything, but it cost me more money because those books were coming out, and they'd already been out at this point by the time I get them. And I had to go to my local comic shop. I replaced most of them, but I had to replace them at cover price, and that got to be a little expensive. And so that was the only issue I've had in 20 plus years with M&M Comics. Most of the time their books come and they're packaged really well. I say 99.9% of the time it has been fantastic. That was that one instance in all those years, but it was covered. We're cool. So still would highly recommend them. Very good service. Their website these days works very well. There used to be a point where the website was pretty basic and paying was pretty basic, but now it's very automated. Goes through very well. So definitely check them out at mmcomics.com. So I'll leave a link down in, well, I will try to leave a link down in the description for that. When I get around to do the editing and putting it on YouTube, I'll try to remember that. Anyway, let's get to the comic books, and I'll show you what I get. This is a typical month, and there are changes every month that happen. Our interest differs, our reasons for buying books or not buying books changes every month. But what I'm going to do, we'll go through this fairly quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on every book, but we'll talk about the books in general as we go along. So I've broken them down into Marvel, DC, independent, and then a special category. So let's just go through them real quick, and I'll show you what I picked up. This came back in the last shipment I just got was in the middle of December. So you got to remember these books were coming out in December, and I apologize. I still haven't. They've been sitting on the desk, and I haven't bagged and boarded them. So I'm gonna be a little careful right here as I put them up here in the stand. But I'll show you what I've been getting. Immortal Thor. This is number 4. Beautiful. And I'll be honest, I've been buying these because of the Alex Ross covers more than the stories. And that's going to be the vast majority. There's going to be a lot of reasons, and a lot of it is going to be about the art and for other reasons, but I will go through them as we go through. This is the miniseries Gods number 2, which I should say, I can't really speak to these because I read a handful of these as a fan, but for the mass majority, I buy them as a collector and as a fan of the art sometimes. I mean, it is what it is. These days, I read only a small bit of my comics. I will thumb through the vast majority of them, and a lot of times that's why I drop things. And I'll talk about that as we go along. Here was the first issue of the new Punisher. And this is one where I've been trying to stop buying duplicates when I went to the LCSs. I knew I had this ordered. When it came out, I didn't bother to get it. But I sort of had to wait I didn't want to buy it. I didn't need 2 copies of that. I just needed a copy. And I waited for this to come in, so I kind of had to wait, and all the buzz off of this is gone now since I finally got it. But that's what I mean by you kind of have to wait for your moment to enjoy these comics, and you kind of miss out on joining in with everybody else. Let's see, we have the first issue. This is a variant issue of the White Widow there. And what you'll see is a lot of first issues. I still am a collector, and first issues for them, it's not everything, but a lot of them, it'll be about a character I like, or maybe it's like Gods. That's an interesting concept. Let's buy that miniseries. Let's buy the first issue on a lot of issues. I still get Spider-Man 37 and 38. Although, to be honest with you, I'm not really thrilled with it. I haven't really enjoyed Spider-Man in, I guess, since John Romita was on the book the previous time. I just have not enjoyed it at all. I haven't really enjoyed the current run on Spider-Man with, well, I guess this was the original. When Romita came on the new Spider-Man books, I got them and everything. That's why I was still getting this and everything. I didn't really enjoy that as well. I think his art has waned over the years. Although the style is still there, there's something missing, and I'm not sure what that is. I did get the first issue of Spider-Boy, and I know this won't be an expensive issue. I mean, that is his first appearance in Spider-Man was kind of the big issue, and even that price has come down and everything. But again, what did I say? First issues and intriguing covers. The Negative Space book cover right there, Spider-Boy #1. I had to get that. I didn't have to get that. What am I talking about? And just because I got the Scotty Young variant as well. Sometimes I get Scotty Young covers, sometimes I don't. I'm not a fan of everything he does, but for some reason I got that and the Negative Space issue. Now, a lot of times when you do these pre-orders like this, there's the book, but the cover art is not even available at that time. So you're taking a chance on what you get sometimes. And most of the time in that case, I will buy on the artist. If it's an artist and they don't have the cover art there when you buy it, I will buy on an artist that I like. If it's an artist I don't really care for or don't even know, I'm not going to buy that book if they're not showing the art. But in this case, I might have seen that. I can't really remember. What else we got here? All right, so they're rebooting the Ultimate Universe, and you've got the Ultimate Universe #1, or is this the special? I think this is just a special, but big fan of the Ultimate Universe. The Ultimates book was my absolute favorite. The Brian Hitch artwork was fantastic, and here you got Brian Hitch artwork, and it would be nice if we got is it Mark Miller or Mark Millar? I never know how to say that. I've heard people say it both ways. Be nice if he was back, practically one of the architects of the Ultimate Universe. I think Hickman is fine, but it always feels like it's a retro, it's a redo, and with Hickman, but it's Brian Hitch artwork. What do you want? I mean, I love this stuff. In fact, and when I do a show on original artwork, I'll have to bring out some of my Brian Hitch Ultimates artwork. I own multiple pages from the first and second series. Not a lot, but a few that my mother actually bought as birthday gifts over the years. So I'll have to break those out. I should have put this was another variant cover from the White Widow, and at this point I can't tell you the artist on this, but definitely was intrigued by the art on that. I'm sure I bought that because of that reason. I'm not a Venom fan of his book. I did have the originals. What was the original series that came back out in the 90s with Bagley on the artwork? What was that? I can't remember the name of the series, but that series. But all these years since the Venom, I've never really been a fan. I didn't have any of these books, but I did pick up this only because I was intrigued with the Black Widow getting a symbiote and reading a little bit about this. So Black Widow has always been one of my favorite characters, so I was intrigued to see what they were going to do with the character, especially right now when she doesn't have an ongoing series, the Black Widow herself. Now, obviously, you saw the White Widow there, but we're talking about, if I'm not mistaken, this should be Natasha. So hopefully that will be what this is. So I'm intrigued. I actually bought a book because I'm intrigued by a storyline, believe it or not. Favorite book, one of the favorite books of all time, and I buy it out of obligation because I love the book, I love the characters, I love the concept. I've been disappointed for a lot of years, but I still buy this, and it's still the Avengers. Avengers from day one was always my favorite comic book growing up. I'd buy it before I'd buy anything else. In fact, I had at some point towards the end of the run, out of that complete first volume run, at one point I was only missing 5 issues out of that entire run, and that was issues 1, 2, 5, and 7. I had everything else. And I think at this point, I've sold a couple things over the years, but I think at this point I still have. I think that's still the same goal. Issues 1, 2. I had issue 7, got it graded, and I ended up selling it. So I'm still missing those particular issues. But I'm not interested necessarily in filling runs necessarily. But those are all big books. So at some point I'd like to get them in the PC just because they are big books in early Silver Age Avengers. But I'm still a fan of the Avengers, and I sit there. I literally said, Sorry, Lise, my wife, communications majors would hate that. No, you don't know. When somebody says they're talking and they go, that's my the communications teacher my wife had would, during their speeches, when she would be giving a speech or somebody would give them a speech and they'd go, that he'd yell out, "No, you don't know." And so I've picked up on that tick for every year. So I catch myself, if I accidentally say that, I catch it and I correct it by pointing out my fault. It's a flaw. It is a speech flaw. You should not be doing that. So anyway, off topic there. But I still get the Avengers. I went through that Jason Aaron run. There were some interesting things in that, and the whole thing kind of just was falling apart. Again, another book I buy out of obligation and I don't enjoy. And that's a theme that you're going to find in a lot of this. As a collector, you go, why are you buying these books? Well, as a collector, I continue to buy these books to add to the PC. Probably, this is something I probably should stop, but I still like collecting these books. And I still like collecting these characters, and you never know when something really interesting is going to happen. Now, I did buy this. I did buy it. I don't know if I've got the other issues, but I think I do, of the Magneto miniseries. And the only reason I ended up buying this, and we'll talk about the X-Men in particular in a second, was the writer on this, J.M. DeMatteis. I think I'm saying that correctly. The writer from Kraven's Last Hunt and a million comics of the Justice League stories with Booster Gold and Blue Beetle and all those guys. Those great Justice League stories. He was writing this, and what I've found is some of the classic writers like this, or Claremont coming back, or there's been a couple others, veterans have come back to write some miniseries, some small story arcs with the X-Men, and sometimes these can be in continuity or just a story from the past that they're inserting into continuity. I've found that those books are the best, because the new books, and let's just talk about the X-Men for a second, the new books are garbage. I can't stand the art, and for the most part I can't stand the storylines. And what you're going to see today is, now I'm sitting here looking, this is the only X-Men book I've got in here. I have literally dropped every title, and I got back on board. I had dropped X-Men over the years. When Claremont left, at some point I finally dropped the X-Men. It was too many titles and I wasn't enjoying it. And that's one of the reasons I will stop buying things, is I'm just not enjoying it. Even if I am a fan of that book, I eventually would drop it. I dropped Spider-Man for a long time. I dropped X-Men in the past before. But when Jonathan Hickman came back on a few years ago, and we had Powers of X and House of X, and that concept, I was really intrigued. So I got back on board, and I went on it hard because I wanted to see where they were going to go with this concept. And I, for 2 years, maybe a little bit more, every title with the X-Men, I went back in, and I was getting every issue: Wolverine, Exterminators, Marauders, Fallen Angels. I don't think that was short-lived as well. But all of these books, including the X-Men books themselves, I was getting every one of them because I wanted to see where this storyline went. And it just went all over the place. Everybody's doing their own thing. And now we're seeing the fruits of all of this, which is the whole... I mean, I can't imagine. You guys let me know what you think of the current X-Men state. I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less. I mean, I've dropped Wolverine. That used to be one of the only titles I would get, as well as the main ongoing X-Men. I dropped all the other side titles, but at this point, I've dropped X-Men. I've dropped Wolverine. I don't know what it would take to get me back into it, other than probably, as I said, one of the classic writers coming back and bringing it back on. You can definitely tell a difference in the dialogue and the writing and the point of view by comparing I know Claremont still does some of these, I want to say Extreme X-Men series occasionally. The last ones I was reading on it, I remember picking it up, and I didn't realize he was still writing it, or was writing a new one, and I'm reading this and I'm going, wow, this is really good. The dialogue and between the characters and the way they talked. Every character had a personality, their personality that you expect. And I'm like, who wrote this? And I'm like, oh my God, it's Claremont. Of course it's good. Of course those characters each have an individual voice. Whereas today's comics, it just feels like, I think this is one of the things that in the industry is you hear a lot of the complaint is that the comics are being written as if the writer is putting himself into these characters, and they're writing themselves as these characters. So every character sounds exactly alike. They're all annoying, self-important type of characters. The way they talk, it's atrocious. And X-Men is one of those titles I just dropped entirely. At some point, we'll probably pick it back up. It will take a writer and it will take an artist of note to really make it worth my while to get back into it. Anyway, that's my X-Men story. Anyway, let's continue real quick here. I did pick up this. This is Marvel Superheroes Battle World. I'm not even sure at this point. As I said, I ordered these things 3 months in advance. But to be honest, I think this is I don't know if it's a retelling of a story from back in the day. It probably is, but you can see it's a homage to the issue number 1 of the original Secret Wars miniseries. But I picked that up probably mostly for the storyline. Captain America is still a legacy comic for me. I still pick it up, and if you watch Bronze and Modern Gods, this book right here, they really talk this book up, and highly recommended the new Captain America. Now, I'm not so much a fan of the art, but the story has been really good. So this has some promise right there. We'll see where that goes. I'd like that art to be a little bit better. I find it a little hard to look at. It's a little stiff, or the style, but I'm trying to get past that and actually just enjoy the storyline. So that has been recommended. Let's see what else we got here. Well, let's put these down, and then we'll switch over to what I've been picking up from DC. Longtime fan of the Justice Society, so when they put out a new book, I have been reading this. Well, I should be saying I've been buying this. And I think this is, I've dropped this now since then as well. In fact, in my recent orders, I've dropped a lot of this as well. In fact, I mean, at one point I was getting up to close to 80 books a month. Now, sometimes there are some duplicates in there as well. We'll get to that a little bit later. But right now, I'm down to around 20 books that I'm buying. And I don't have that order in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly what I'm buying. But I know I've dropped, Justice League is one of those books. In fact, I've dropped everything from DC at this point. Well, I do have some Batman here, but I pretty much have dropped everything. This is Supergirl issue special number 1, and I bought this, again, number 1 issue, and you also have a Frank Cho cover as well, so can't go wrong with that. I might have to save that for the next time he shows up to a convention here in the Baltimore area, which shouldn't be hard because he is local. Let's see, we've got the Gotham War Scorched Earth number 1, and everything I read about this is that the whole story, there's plenty of channels. Thinking Critical, I think, talked about this whole storyline with the Gotham War, between Batman and Catwoman, and how badly Batman's family has been written. That it's like these characters wouldn't side with Selina Kyle saying, "Oh, it's okay. I'm teaching them to be better criminals. The crimes we're committing is okay because they're not the really bad crimes." Like, none of these characters that would side with Batman would go along with that. Crime is crime, right? And it was just kind of stupid. Watch Thinking Critical, and he will talk about this whole storyline as well. And I can tell you this, I've dropped Batman right after this. I've dropped this title as well. There's nothing interesting at this point that I'm really intrigued to go back to. If anything, if something pops up and it pops up, I'll go back and buy a back issue, but I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about buying new books at this point. I had been buying the Detective Comics. I've been intrigued with some of the storylines in this, and especially some of the covers. They've been really macabre type covers like this. So I've dropped this as well, mostly because I'm just not, again, I'm not enjoying this. And when the books are $4.99, now I'm getting 30% off of that, but even so, I just don't want the books. It will take something, again, to get me back into Batman. It took James Tynion, or Tynan, how do you say his name, by the way? I've met him 3 times, and I still don't know how to say his last name. He got me back into Batman with his run, with the whole storylines, with Punchline, and some of the new characters, especially Punchline, but the other new characters. I really enjoyed that run, and after he left, I continued with the book, and I enjoyed a lot of stories right after that as well. But now I've just it's petered out. I've dropped it again. Batman's gone. And that's it for DC. There's nothing else I've been buying. And right now, as I said, that's it. I'm not there. There's no, unless there's a special issue maybe, or a #1 issue just as a collector, there's nothing I'm buying from DC. Go back to the Independence, and one of the things I definitely have been enjoying is Big Game. Got all these great Mark Millar characters, and it has the characters that I've liked in there was the ones from Wanted. You know me, Wanted was one of my favorite books. I remember going to my local comic book shop. Now, this is the thing that I would have never ordered this book as the way I've been doing this. You read your previews book, and you look on there. I mean, that back in the day, it was a previews book, right? Much like here's the Marvel preview guide and the DC Connect preview guide that they send me every month. But Diamond, I believe it was Diamond, would send out, they would provide the M&M, Lee Tennant, whoever, with the catalog. So they would send the catalog, and at one point I think you had to order it as well, and it was probably a little bit of a charge to get that. That's the only way you could preview the books. It was before the internet, right? So you didn't have a lot of information available to get this book, let's say. So Wanted was one of those, and was up here. There was a local comic book shop near my office that I started going to, and one day I go in there, and there is the second issue of Wanted. It is the J.G. Jones artwork, and it is the cover with the fox on there, and it looks just like Holly Berry. And I'm going, oh my God, I love that art. I got to get that. And I read that book, and I went back and bought issue 1, and I fell in love with that series. So much so that today I own, I think, at least 2 pages of artwork from J.G. Jones from that series. Really good pages too. So really liked the Killer and the Wanted characters in this, and just the way he took his universe of characters and combined them together in this. Now, I can say I'm not as big a fan of some of the art per se, but it's not bad. It's not bad. Definitely enjoyed Big Game. I continue to pick up Something's Killing the Children. I continue reading this book. I don't buy multiple copies of this. Every month they have 3 or 4 different covers, foil editions or whatever. I've stopped that. All those extra copies of things. Right now I'm not buying too many multiple copies on some of these alternate covers, unless it's an artist I really like. Sometimes going through the previews, I will see In fact, on the website, you can go #1 issues. In fact, you hit that button and every #1 issue can come up if you want to collect that way. Sometimes I will do that just to see if there's something out there that might be interesting. And so I picked up Unnatural Order from Vault Comics. Just did a little read on that on the preview, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So sometimes I will pick up books like this occasionally. I wouldn't say on spec, but you never know when something else is going to become the next Something's Killing the Children. So sometimes I will pick up issues like that. And then the last book on here is every month, as long as it's out, because it's not out every month. There's times when the creator will take a break and there will be a little pause in the story. But this is the book that every time I get my monthly fix of comics, I open it up, I go through everything, and this is the book I read. This is the book in fact, if I get to it before I finish going through the pile of books, I'll read it before I even get to the rest of the comics. It is my favorite comic book. It has been my favorite comic book ongoing for many years now, and it is Usagi Yojimbo, and this is the part 2 of 5 of the Ice and Snow storyline, and of course you've got this homage to Albedo number 3 with J instead of Usagi on the cover there. And all-time favorite comic book, favorite story. In fact, in a future video, we're going to be talking about Usagi Yojimbo a little bit. But this right here is the one book that every month I read, and I read first before I even look at the rest of the comic book sometimes. So that's my recommendation right here. About everything I've got so far, this right here is my favorite comic book, and I would recommend anybody going back and reading the whole collection from day one. Read everything, because it is one of the most enjoyable books that I have ever had and probably will ever have. I mean, there are runs of comics, as I talked about earlier, the Avengers, but there are points in the Avengers I absolutely love, but you can tell years later I'm still buying the Avengers, but I don't like it. I buy it as a collector, not as a fan. So this right here, I'm a fan and a collector because I buy the books, right? But I'm a fan of Stan Sakai and Usagi Yojimbo. All right, so that brings to the special section of comics that I get. And I don't get these. It depends every month on what they put out. But I've talked about on this channel before, I'm a big fan of facsimile comic books. And I do it actually as a fan of the books, because sometimes I like to get these books and you can read them because they're good books. You just can't afford some of them because some of them they reprint. They reprint Action Comics #1. You're not getting that. But to read a facsimile reprint and actually see all the other stories and sometimes see the ads, that's pretty cool. But as a CGC guy who I see the value in getting some of these graded and sold. Now, we're not talking the money of the original comic book, but in their own right, a lot of these actually can have some pretty good value. Get the X-Men #1 facsimile done. It's a $125 book. A lot of them range in that $125. And over the last couple years, I've played that game, getting Hulk 181's facsimiles graded and sold, and did pretty good on that. But what I was finding, I was buying Hulk 181 facsimile reprints for too much money then to get them graded and then only make $100. I mean, between fees and everything else, there wasn't a lot of margin in there. Still, there is some margin, don't get me wrong. But I found that it was easier to, when these new facsimiles come out, just buy copies of those and for less than cover price with the service like this. Don't go to the stand, don't buy them for $10 when you go to the, well, you can buy them at comic book shows. They'll have them for sale, and a lot of people sell them for like $10 a piece. But what's better is when they come out new, just order them. I buy multiple copies usually on some of these things. So let me show you what I picked up this particular month for facsimile reprints. And we've got the Doom Patrol #99. I'm not sure at this point. I cannot remember what the significance of this particular issue was. It's definitely, when they do a facsimile reprint, there's a reason for it. I'm sure there was a first appearance. I cannot remember what there was on this. But again, I usually buy 1 or 2 copies, at least 2 copies usually of just about everything. And in some of these cases, we've got a special edition, and I'll show you that in a second. They reprinted X-Men 141, and you know, guys know I love my John Byrne X-Men. I'd rather just, for me, I'm collecting the original on this, but I did buy a couple copies of that cover, but I also bought a couple of the foil edition as well. And I'm intrigued by the foil edition. I mean, these are really well-printed comics. If you can pull a 9, or even a 10, for God's sake, on something like this, it could do pretty good. I mean, you're not going to get super rich, but you could do pretty good. I did buy facsimile of 142 just so I could have the set. Those weren't too big. Those, when I talk about getting them graded, I'm just holding on to those. I like to have the facsimiles in hand, but there are other books that are much bigger books that I would think would fall in this category, getting them graded by CGC. The Amazing Fantasy facsimile, Spider-Man #1 facsimile, Hulk #1, but Batman #1, Superman #1, you know, things like that. I think I just said you know again. Ooh, that's 2 in 1 episode at least. But they did come out with the facsimile for Wonder Woman #1. I always loved this cover. That was what a great dynamic cover. But I picked that up, and I also picked up the foil edition on that. And they also had the first copy of All-Star Comics with my all-time favorite. I always loved this cover. In fact, I think I've got one of those giant, what do you call those books? Back in the early 70s, they had the big reprint books. What did you call those? Treasury editions. At least I think that's what the Marvel ones, I'm not sure what they called them from DC, but they had this. So I read those original stories in the giant format from All-Star Comics right here. And I also bought the foil edition of that as well. So I'm going to take those out of here before I ding them up on this stand. And then the last one I ended up buying was, I guess this is the first appearance of the original Green Lantern. A character I've really loved back in the day. I love reading all of these original Green Lantern stories. What they've done to that character in today's world, today's writers, is just atrocious. I don't want to get into the morality of his sexuality that they're doing in the comics. I think it's atrocious to take a character that leans one way and then make it another way. Again, I think I'm getting on a topic that probably will touch some nerves, but don't mess with the character. The character exists as it is. Today's writers will take a character like this and put their own point of view on something like this. They've ruined Tim Drake. I'm sorry. That's atrocious what they did to that character. He's always had the potential of being one of the best Robins out there. He was one of the best detectives and everything. Focus on that. Focus on that kind of thing. But to just turn him into a gay character is just atrocious. That character was never like that. And make a new character, guys. If you're today's writer, make a new character. Don't be lazy. And I don't want to get in on anybody's nerves, but that's just awful. I won't read that. I won't read that garbage today. But I will go back and I'll read this, and I'll read a lot of the old time stories like this, and I'll enjoy those. But I won't buy today's garbage. And it's not because of their changing the orientation. Well, actually, it's completely because they're changing the orientation, but it's not because of the orientation itself. It's because you're messing with history and you're changing a character that was never that way. So there's my 2 cents worth on that. But anyway, this right here is a typical order for me every month from M&M Comics. And again, I will supplement this from my local comic book shops with books I've missed. And doing this, let me see if I can find what did I do with it? I think I've lost it here. The previews guide. Let's use the Marvel one. when you go through the guides, and this is for 3 months from now, this is to make my new order. I can go through this book and I can go and I can look and read about the books and everything. The DC one's the same way. I don't get the Diamond Previews book, and that thing's 3/4 of an inch thick anymore. I go online and I look at each title from each publisher that I'm kind of interested in, and trust me, I miss a lot of doing it this way. I've missed so many books over the years because I wasn't in the know. I wasn't following. There was no social media back in the day, and pretty much you're just taking a chance by reading the previews guide. These days, there's definitely some word, there's some buzz out there. There's social media. You can get some heads up, advance notice, but I still miss a lot of things. I missed Something's Killing Children when it first came out. Got onto it, but not quite quick enough. So I miss stuff all the time, but that's part of the joy now of going to the local comic book shop and making up for it each and every Wednesday if I decide to go down. And that's pretty much it. So as a typical guy who didn't grow up from the area with a local comic book shop, this is how I buy comics. And I still continue to buy comics, new comic books like this all the time. So hope you guys enjoyed today's video and got a little insight into the way I collect. And this is how I collect new comics for the most part. If you enjoyed today's video, definitely hit that like button. I think I've already said that at the beginning of the video. Channel right now is doing really good. We went over 1,500 subs before the end of the year. Channel continues to grow. I appreciate everybody who sits here with me all day, especially these long videos. It seems like the last month have been really long videos, so I hope you guys are enjoying all this. But leave me a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you think of the books that I pick up, how I collect. Let me know the insights. Let me know how you collect. And I'd love to hear from you guys. And every week, join me for every show. Definitely, if you're sitting here right now, you're sitting here with a live chat as the episodes air. For the most part, almost every week, I'll sit there for the show, and I'll have a live chat with whoever comes into the live chat area. But that's it for now. The sales pitch part of this right now is if you ever see anything on the channel, definitely reach out to me at collectorauctions@yahoo.com or DM me on Instagram. And you can currently see what I have for sale on my eBay store or my Shortbox page by clicking the links below. I'll leave all that in the description. But that is it, guys. Enjoy the episode. I will see you on the next episode. It should be out on Monday. I don't know what it's going to be. I will have a short turnaround because I'm traveling this weekend. And if for some reason you don't get an alert on Monday, it means that the travel plans and everything have taken over and I haven't had time to do the show. But don't worry, we will have a show sometime next week if it's not on Monday. Just again, hit that click that notification bell, and that way you guys will be alerted, and I'll definitely put it out on social media when the show gets ready to air as well. But anyway, I'm rambling. Guys, take care. I will see you for the next show, and remember, every comic has a story.